That Podcast Thing presents Home Movie Club, originally recorded February 2018, episode number 22, without the oops.
Hello and welcome to Home Movie Club, the podcast in which we take an irreverent, and let's face it, sometimes irrelevant look at the top grossing movies of the last 80 odd years. This time we have the 1996 movie Independence Day, written by Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, directed by Roland Emmerich, and starring Bill Pullman, Will Smith, and of course, Jeff Goldblum. So, I am delighted to say that joining me as always are Joe Carter.
Hello.
Daisy Swaffer.
Hi.
And my lovely wife, Sammy Kelch.
Good afternoon.
So, yes, Independence Day, 1996's top grossing movie. But what do we all think? Let's get some opening thoughts. Joe?
I like the movie.
Okay. Would you like to elucidate more, or do you want to save that for later?
I like the movie a lot. I recognise Jeff Goldblum by his arm.
Interesting.
And Daisy, do you want to give us your opening thoughts?
So this is, an action disaster type movie, so kind of fits firmly in the bracket of movies I like. And it was entertaining, and it was, alright. I haven't watched it since it first came out in 96, so I was quite excited to watch it again. And I was like, I couldn't remember any of it from 96, and it was alright. I was expecting to like it more than I actually ended up doing.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. It's not necessarily aged as well as it possibly could have done. Sammy, your opening thoughts?
I think it is totally 90s. It's a bit cheesy, and sort of coming into it with that knowledge, I like it quite a bit. I think possibly because I like quite a few of the people in it quite a bit. Like, I really like Jeff, and I really like Will Smith, and Bill Pullman looks a decent amount like my former improv coach. So yeah, good stuff.
Is that a factor in movies that you look for?
No, not necessarily. I just remember, when back in the heady days of my improvisational comedy career, that we would frequently comment on the fact that our coach looks just like Bill Pullman. So it was like a whole thing.
If I have seen it since it came out in 96, it would have been probably not much after 96. I certainly haven't seen it recently. I vaguely remembered everything that happened in it, but
I didn't.
Yeah, as I said, it's a late 90s film, and it feels very much like a late 90s film. It feels very much like an Emmerich and Devlin film, possibly not helped by the fact, or possibly helped, I'm not sure, by the fact that the music was also David Arnold, which is who did all the Stargate and things like that, and it's all by the same sort of group of people.
Speaking of Emmerich and Devlin, can I jump in with our first fun fact of the episode?
Yes!
Yes, of course.
So it was whilst Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin were actually being interviewed, I think it was on like a panel thing, like a convention panel, about Stargate that they'd obviously made, and they'd been talking about the existence of alien life and things. And there was a reporter who asked Emmerich why he made a film with content like that if he didn't believe in aliens. And Emmerich said that he was still fascinated by the idea of an alien arrival. And said, and kind of in his response started saying, imagine what it would be like to wake up one morning and discover 15-mile wide spaceships were hovering over the world's largest cities. And Emmerich then turned to Devlin and said, I think we've got our idea for our next film.
Oh my god.
When they did write it, they sat down and wrote it over just a 2-week period of time. And then they finished it on the Thursday, sent it out to a bunch of places, and by the Monday it was already in pre-production.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That explains why I like it, though, because I love Stargate.
Yeah.
Stargate is the business. Like, for years, I would, literally every night, it ran at 7 o'clock in repeats on Channel 11 in Canada, and every night, just for years, I would watch Stargate SG-1 at dinner.
I mean, again, Emmerich and Devlin, they had a whole run of... Because didn't they do the Godzilla remake as well? And
Did they? For me, Dean
think so.
Devlin's epitome is the Librarians movies and series.
Oh, the librarian!
Oh, yes, of course. I knew I recognised the name. That's why I love those so much as well. That's just totally my genre, the sort of conspiracy theory, alien language.
Super cheesy.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I was a
Yeah,
librarian for 12 years. So
I don't know that series.
It's
but...
obvious that I'm going to love the librarian, right?
Yeah. The Librarians is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I think they kind of went downhill after that, and they started doing more and more sort of, well, less and less successful cheesy action slash.
But
this
was
is still a good
very
film.
Successful Independence Day because it was the highest grossing movie of 1996. Else we wouldn't be watching it.
I think it was a big kind of. I think the thing with it is it's a big kind of spectacular tentpole movie, and I think it was probably.
It was very well promoted.
I'm trying to remember, but I'm fairly sure I saw it at the cinema
Mission
initially.
Impossible, Jerry Maguire, they all came out in 96.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so it did have some competition then.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, let's get into the story, because although it's a reasonably simplistic story, it does jump around quite a lot, and there is quite a lot to sort of go into.
It has many people.
It's one of the traditional, in inverted commas, disaster movies that has a whole ensemble cast, and some of them are not getting out alive.
Spoilers, kind of. He didn't
Once
say
again,
which
it's
people.
time to say spoiler alert. If you haven't watched
Yes.
the movie and you plan to and you don't want to be spoiled, stop listening now, go watch it, then come back.
Yes, this... I'm not sure when the sort of statute of spoiler rings generally ends, but this film is 22 years old, so I think we've got to be there
no,
now.
that makes me feel old.
Yeah, stop that, Dave. Stop
Yeah,
it.
Sorry.
don't say that, honey. That's just mean.
All right, it's July the 2nd. We know this because we get a big flashcard that tells us it's July the 2nd.
Thank you, flashcard.
Film opens on the shot of the moon and the plaque commemorating the moon
I
landing.
liked the way it showed the footprints still there.
Commemorating the moon landings in 96. The footprints obviously undisturbed because there's no atmosphere and nothing to move them. But suddenly they start shaking and getting disturbed by an unseen object flying overhead.
With ominous music.
With ominous music, yes.
So you know it's not a nice, mysterious force.
Yeah, this isn't like, oh, what shiny happy thing is happening here? It's ominous music.
The object comes into shot and appears to be a huge alien spaceship.
Yay.
I mean,
That
at this
sets
point,
the tone for the
I-
movie right there. Ominous music, huge alien spaceship. You know where you're working.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good opening.
We switch to the SETI Institute in New Mexico. Radio is on and playing REM's It's the End of the World as We Know It,
Approves.
which I thought was always quite fitting.
They did originally have a different song choice, but I've forgotten now what it was. It was quite late on they changed it to that one.
Fair enough. That seems to fit, so. An alarm goes off and the duty officer turns off the radio to listen to some kind of signal. He makes a phone call to his sleeping supervisor and makes him listen to the sound.
Oh, only after he's whacked himself on the head.
Oh yeah, getting up and whacked. And this is the other thing, is this is actually one of the actors who I recognise from being in the original Stargate movie as well. So they do recycle some of these actors.
They do.
Yeah,
They
he's
do
in,
like
he's in
some people.
a few movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you listen carefully here, you can hear the rhythm is actually da dit 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 dit, which is Morse code for die.
Oh, wow, that's super nice.
I hadn't picked up on that, but fair enough.
Die. It's like they're not
It's-
subtle with their codes here. They're already
No.
telling us to die.
There is, a bit of an absence of subtlety there with the message.
But no one was listening for Morse code, so they didn't get it.
Honestly.
Nope.
Why would you not listen for Morse code?
The thing that amused me is that the guy was still in his pajamas and putting on a dressing gown, so he was obviously sleeping in the institute.
Yeah, I don't think they ever get to leave, so yep, the supervisor scrambles out of bed, down the hall, and into the operation rooms,
Rubbing his head.
rubbing his head where he's banged it, yeah.
I can't remember the actor's name, but he's in like everything and is a cool actor.
Some quick analysis shows that whatever is transmitting this signal is pretty close to Earth, is moving, and more importantly has just passed inside the moon's orbit, which we know about because we've just seen it do that.
Yeah, there was an ominous shadow over the Buzz Aldrin and whatchamacallit sign on the moon.
Neil Armstrong.
Neil Armstrong and the other guy.
And the other guy, whose name I never
Buzz
remember.
Lightyear, yes.
Sorry, other guy.
Everyone
Michael
remembers
Collins.
Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and then there's the
But
other
to be fair,
guy.
Michael Collins didn't actually land on the moon, so that's why he's not quite as famous.
Well, he gets a plaque on there still.
Well, good, because he did a lot of work. We're now at Space Command in the Pentagon. Military commanders are discussing what this thing could possibly be, but they know it's not a meteorite or anything natural because it's slowing down.
This is good logic.
Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's an alien spaceship.
So they know it's not natural because it's slowing down, so they decide to get the Secretary of Defense on the phone, which seems a sensible thing to do at this point.
Smart.
We then get our first shot of President Whitmore, played by Sammy's improv teacher. Played by Bill Pullman. Who is lounging on a bed in his lounge coat on the phone to his wife.
It's 2:45 a.m. Has he been asleep and is already awake, or has he not gone to sleep yet?
I don't know, but he passes the phone to his daughter, who's also awake at 2:45 a.m.
Well, because the phone rang.
Yeah, that.
I would be awake if the phone rang.
Yeah.
He's talking to his wife, and he says, "I'm sorry, I am currently in bed with a beautiful young lady," and then passes the phone to his daughter because it's like, he's cheating. No way, it's his daughter. That's adorable. He's awesome.
So he passes the phone to his daughter and leaves the bedroom, where he meets up with an aide who apparently is called Connie Sampo. Although I say apparently because I don't think at any point in the film her surname was ever mentioned. She was only ever called Connie.
Yeah, I don't recall.
It's nice that she had a surname.
Indeed.
Yeah.
She's played by Margaret Collin, who one of many people in this film that I vaguely recognise from this film, but nothing else. They are discussing the public and press perception of his work, because apparently his approval ratings are low and people are complaining that they elected a warrior. They got a politician, because apparently Whitman was an Air Force pilot before he was the president. I'm sure that won't come up again later at all.
No, plot point is not relevant.
No, that was just one of those, sort of incidental details that means literally nothing.
His
Just
approval
forget they
ratings
said
will
that.
be much higher by the end of this movie. I mean, in 2 days' time.
For those still alive to approve it.
Yes.
However, their conversation is interrupted by a call from the Defense Secretary. We're suddenly back in space and we see the now slightly... I don't know. I mean, this is a shot. It's a shot of a satellite going across the screen and then crashing into a vast black wall that is the side of the incoming ship, which seems a bit cliched, but I think that might just because they also did it in the Christmas special on one of the Doctor Who's, and so we know it from that as well.
Well, I think this one came first.
This one did certainly come
It
first,
super did, yeah.
and it's a good way of showing just the huge size of
Yeah,
the
it's hard to
of
get
the ship.
scale in space because you're not really able to compare it to anything else. So it is a nice way of conveying that.
So now we're in New York City, and we can tell it's New York City because we get a shot of Statue of Liberty. Must be New York. And of course it's Statue of Liberty holding the plaque that says July the 4th on it.
Well, it's a reasonable
Again.
filmic shorthand, isn't it? It establishes the scene.
It's not subtle, is it?
It does its job. Sometimes you just need to be functional,
Yeah.
I think.
True. Two men are playing chess and chatting outside on a nice sunny day. As they play, they talk about the younger man's divorce. The younger man, David Levison, played by Jeff Goldblum.
Hi, Jeff. We love you.
Hey, Jeff. I totally recognised his arm as it panned into the shot. It was like just a quiff of hair and then the arm, and I was like, that's Jeff Goldblum.
He's got beautiful hands.
David beats his opponent, his dad, Julius Levison, played by Judd Hirsch.
Yay,
Who
Jeff.
plays
That
the
hurts.
standard
Your
Jewish
go-to
dad
Jewish
in
dad
everything.
for any kind of film reason.
But he is awesome, and he does not age.
No, he doesn't age. He looks exactly the same now as he did then. He's just immortal. And we hope
Yeah.
he does stick around forever, because who will they go to for a Jewish dad if he's not there?
Well, Jeff Goldblum went on to play in the most recent Thor movie one of the Elders of the Universe. So if he's one of the Elders of the Universe's dads, then he's like millions of years old, and that's
Yeah.
probably why he just continues to look great.
Looks great for it,
So,
doesn't he? Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
bully for you, Judd. You're awesome. We
Yeah.
love you.
Oh, yeah.
So Jeff, that's his name.
Just call him Jeff. That's fine.
Jeff.
We know who you mean.
So David beats his dad at chess and leaves to go back to work. But when he gets back to work, there is an air of total chaos. Apparently David works at a cable company and customers are calling in to complain because their service has been
Oh, it's
disrupted.
a cable company. I never managed to grasp what the actual function of the workplace was.
Well, it
Yeah.
said he was a cable repairman, so I figured cable company, yeah.
Yeah, it is mentioned later on when they're in the car that what he does. Davy's colleague, Marty, played by Harvey
Firestein. One time I had some kind of infection and I completely lost my voice and I couldn't talk for like 2 days. And when my voice came back and I had to like go back to school, I was like, I don't know, 15, 16 at this point, so the movie was slightly more relevant. When I went back to school because my voice was back and I was feeling slightly better, I sounded just like Harvey Firestein for like 2 days.
Do we know him from anything else then? Because I didn't recognise him at all.
I don't know, but I recognise his voice.
You know him from the 90s?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anytime that they
the
wanted
90s.
a camp character, generally in the 90s, this was the guy they called.
Yeah, he was like the go-to token camp guy.
Yeah, so
For
we've
a
had
long
the
time.
go-to Jewish dad and the go-to camp guy already in this film. So epitomising the 90s in this movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Marty is also quite panicking. He shows David some figures, which then gets David agitated as well, saying that what he is seeing is impossible. Can I just say at this point that saying David quite regularly is really quite weird, because obviously that's my name.
Sweetheart,
But
we
I'm not
all know
talking
who
about
you
me.
mean if you just call him Jeff.
No, I'm not going to call him Jeff.
Fine.
That sounds even worse. We then switch to Imperial Valley in California, where we see 3 kids. Obviously, they have not heard about the alien invasion yet because they're looking far too chilled and relaxed, just hanging out in their RV. However, they have different problems soon enough when an angry farmer named Lucas comes up with a ruined crop. He says that if their father, Russell, doesn't show up soon, he's going to find someone else. It sounds a bit ominous because we don't know at this point what his father does. However, we then see Russell Case, played by Randy Quaid.
Andy!
Hooray! In the air, flying over a field. He seems to be a crop duster. His son, Miguel, rides alongside on a small motorcycle, waving and trying to get his father's attention. Noticing this, Case lands, but then can barely get out of his plane. Miguel informs him that he's dusting the wrong field.
And this isn't like the field next door, it's the entire
The
wrong
other side of
of
town,
town.
Oh my god.
Well, he's drunk.
He is
I mean,
Yeah,
literally.
Case seems more a little bit befuddled and takes a swig from a bottle that he's carrying
But,
with him.
I mean, apart from his obvious navigation issues, he's flying quite competently for someone horrifically drunk, I've got to say.
Yeah, but let's face it, don't drink and fly, kids.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely. I'm not
good.
condoning drinking and flying. I'm just saying...
Oh, no, that's what we heard, Daisy.
His
We
navigation issues seem to have suffered quite badly, but less so his flying skills.
We're back in space and we see smaller craft detach themselves from the main craft and head out to circle the bright blue world below them. Dun, dun, dun.
Or as I wrote in my notes, giant circles leave the mothership.
Giant circles leave
Yep.
the even gianter circle. Back at the White House, and the President and others, including the Secretary of Defense, Albert Nimitz, played by James Rebhorn, again, someone who you recognise the face but have no idea what he's been in, and General Gray, played by Robert Loggia, again, see previous comment about people you recognise but have no idea from where, are discussing what to do, including an option to upgrade the country's defence status to DEFCON 3. Which, if I learned anything from War Games, isn't that severe.
Yeah.
So, there we go.
Well, I think if at that point they'd realised that there were giant circles leaving the mothership, they might have gone for, a more severe DEFCON rating.
Sure, at this point they just have sort of an echo on a radar and
At this point, it's not a meteor because it was slowing down, so we're not sure what it is. That's the stage that they're at.
It's a mystery menace. Probably.
Nimziki is pushing for this upgrade, but General Gray is against the idea, pointing out that it's July the 4th. It's the holiday weekend, so lots of service personnel are off enjoying the weekend and having barbecues and excessive drinking and whatever else Americans do.
Which to me,
when they
if I
have
was
holidays.
invading America, seems like the perfect time to invade America.
Oh my god, seriously, there would be cake everywhere and barbecue and corn on the cob and like frisbee
And beer.
and plenty of beer.
That's the other thing with this film, though. It's very centered around the US,
Of course it
and
is.
everything
I mean, it's
is
called
US
Independence
centric.
Day.
Yeah.
But actually, they're attacking the entire planet. So what are the British doing on the 4th of July? It's probably a Wednesday. It's not a Wednesday because it's a weekend. But it's probably sort of
But as we learn
just
through
watching
the movie,
cricket
no
and-
one else around the world is capable of working out what to do without the Americans telling them.
Yes, this
Yeah.
is true.
Oh, no.
The discussion is terminated, though, when another military officer brings in the news that smaller ships have broken off from the main ship and are about to enter the Earth's atmosphere.
Heck.
Oops.
I think heck is a good response to that.
Yeah.
Like, if I were in the midst of that crisis, I think my response would be heck.
Yeah, the movie jumps around pretty quickly here as we're suddenly in Iraq watching a huge saucer-shaped craft come into view, preceded by a wall of fire as its entry superheats the air in front of it, I assume. There's no real science behind it, but it does look cool. So, we'll go with that, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm not expecting any actual science in this entire movie. So
if you go into this movie expecting accurate, hard science, I think you're going to be sorely disappointed.
Yeah, my disbelief is firmly suspended before going into the movie.
I mean, this is from the people who brought us Stargate, the hardest science of them all. So
there is not a spin-off, but a sort of something else that came out at the same time, which sort of was done by the BBC as an audio drama and was sort of done from the British point of view. And that actually did have slightly more science in it. And indeed did have scientists in it, because it had Patrick Moore as someone.
Patrick Moore.
Well, actually had Patrick Moore playing Patrick Moore, so,
Better.
I love that they made this. I really do.
This was called Independence Day UK, and I listened to a little bit of it again when we were sort of sorting out for this podcast. And I have to say, it has not aged well. At all.
I thought this movie had actually aged well.
This movie has aged fairly well. The BBC radio drama, not so much. Okay, so back to the film. We're then on a US submarine in the Persian Gulf, where they are monitoring the ships and getting infrared images of them, which are then relayed back to Washington. We're now back at the White House. And this is just backwards and forwards, left and right, up and down. We're back to the White House, where people are rushing around the Oval Office with updates as it becomes clear that the vast saucer-shaped ships have appeared all around the world.
The circles
not
landed.
Just America.
The circles are hovering.
President is in communications with the pilots in an AWAC, who are trying to gain visibility as they fly towards the ship.
What's an AWAC?
Airborne Early Warning Aircraft. It doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well, does it?
AWAC.
So yes, the president is in communications with the pilots as they're trying to find this alien ship. However, before they can discover anything useful, the aircraft is vaporized in a big cloud of fire. So another one to the body count.
Great balls of fire.
Yeah. Back at the White House, the team discuss what to do now. The president refuses to leave the White House as he is unwilling to trigger a panic. And then we're back at David's office. Again, David is trying to analyse the signal while everybody else is glued to the news channels. Secret is out to the general public.
Well, I think the ginormous spaceships hovering over the cities kind of give the game away.
Slightly, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit obvious, isn't it?
It's not like you can get Darren Brown to, hide them.
David starts speaking about his thoughts on the signal to other technicians in the office, but they're all too mesmerised by the news to pay attention. And he's too wrapped up in his own thoughts to notice anything else. Connie is seen giving a news conference about the appearance of the ships. Apparently Connie is the press secretary. I don't think that was made clear previously, but that is what she does. So she is giving this news conference. We then cut to Casey's kids in California who are also watching the news. So it jumps backwards and forwards an awful lot, this movie.
But it makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense when you're watching it. It doesn't make that much sense when you're trying to write about it to do it in a podcast.
There's a lot of disparate character arcs that we're kind of following simultaneously that don't really come together until quite a ways toward the end.
Particularly the drunken crop duster.
Oh, but I love Randy. I just really love Randy.
David's co-workers start heading to the bomb shelter in the basement. No one's really sure what the aliens are up to, but it seems like a smart idea. David, though, goes against the tide of people and heads up to the roof of their skyscraper office block to have a look.
In fairness, he's going to get a good view from there.
Yeah. And, in essence, being in a bomb shelter is probably not going to help that much.
Yeah.
Back in California, and Russell Case is in a diner drinking something from a coffee cup. Hopefully coffee. A group of locals come in and start teasing him about his general befuddlement and for thinking that, dun dun dun, he'd been kidnapped by aliens a few years back.
10 years back.
Know.
10 years ago. I'm sure that won't come back anytime soon either.
No, that's entirely irrelevant. Yeah, then it's never going to be mentioned again.
The fact that there are giant alien spaceships hovering over cities makes his story so completely implausible. I mean,
exactly,
kidnapped by aliens? Aliens don't exist. Oh, wait.
As the men are laughing and Case starts to leave, the whole place starts shaking. One of the alien ships is moving over the area. Suddenly, Case's whole alien story might not seem quite so stupid. Case's family watch from outside of their trailer as the ships appear. Suddenly, we're somewhere else again, and we see another new character, a young boy, Dylan, running around into his mother's bedroom to tell her about the ships appearing in the sky. He finds her and another man, Steve Hiller, played by Will Smith, asleep.
Smith!
The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air being the only thing any of us knew him from before this.
Yep. It's kind of amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
They feel the rumbling the ships are making, but they think it's just another earthquake, as this is LA.
It's a 4.0 tops. laughs.
Since they don't think anything is really wrong, they go back to sleep and the kid just goes out again. In New York, David finally realises something about the signal and rushes back inside of his building from his rooftop lookout. On the TV, the president gets ready to address the nation. So he goes back downstairs and finds Marty, who is cowering under a table, which is odd because everybody else went down into the bomb shelters.
Can I just say, at one of these points, there was a really, like, my favourite shot of the whole movie was in it. As we see the ships kind of approaching the cities, mostly they've been like covered in cloud. It's looked like large banks of fairly solid cloud approaching. And I'm not sure what bridge it is, possibly one of the bridges to Manhattan, but we get this beautiful shot of the giant spaceship kind of breaking through the cloud just as it goes over the bridge, and it's stunning. And I wish we could like pause on that moment in the film and then before we continue.
The other thing about this film is that from what I remember of watching it, is that I think it might be one of those where it was made, there were subtle changes made for the British audience, because I'm sure when I watched it, most of the news footage was from Sky.
Ah,
Yeah.
Whereas the one we watched was probably the international version, because although there was a Sky News person on there, it was only really for one address, whereas I'm sure with the one I watched, it was all this guy from Sky News. And then in this version, it was lots of other people as well. So that might just be my mind playing tricks. I don't know.
I'm afraid I don't have that in my fun fact.
We're back in California with Steve Hillier. He's finally getting out of bed. He goes for a wee, and as he looks out the window, which that window seemed awfully low for someone going to a toilet in there. That seemed like a bit
He was
embarrassing.
stood up. He's quite a tall chap.
I think in England that window would have been frosted, but
Yes,
no, this
it would
wasn't.
have. Yeah, in England it would have.
So he uses the bathroom and he sees neighbours rushing to move out of their houses. He assumes it's about quake, because this thing happens quite regularly. He goes out to get the newspaper and realises all of a sudden that, in fact, it's all of the neighbours are frantically gathering their belongings and moving out. He looks up at a passing helicopter and follows it towards the alien spaceship in the sky, hovering over LA.
And they're kind of up on a hill, so it's kind of level with them as well.
Yeah, so obviously he didn't notice it at all, because later on we get a shot where she just points out the window and it's just there in front of them.
But if you're not looking, then it's not necessarily something you'd see. I mean, I often don't look out my window.
Yeah, they're a bit oblivious to it, but that's probably fair enough. We're back in New York City and David is talking to Marty. He tells Marty that the aliens are about to strike. He explains that his big discovery was that the signal is slowly cycling down to nothing. And it's all there basically to synchronise the aliens' movements as the ships move into position.
It's going to stop in 6 hours. 6 hours. This is not very long.
When the counter reaches 0, it'll be checkmate.
Dun, dun,
Which is
dun.
a little bit of a callback to when he was playing chess with his dad.
Yes.
David calls his ex-wife in the White House, because as we've seen, apparently his ex-wife, the communications director, is Connie, so that's convenient. He tries to warn her to leave Washington, but she doesn't want to hear it and hangs up on him.
She's quite busy.
Can't think why. She's quite busy, and he's,
She's doing a very important job, and she's quite busy right now. Not the right time to deal with ex-husband. Thanks very much. Okay, thanks, bye.
No. On the TV, the president asks people to leave cities in an orderly fashion if they want to flee.
Lol.
Yeah.
Cut to
Panic.
screaming.
However,
that is realistic.
However, David seems more interested in the fact that the president says he and his staff, so by default his ex-wife, are going to remain in the White House. So he jumps on his bike and rides through the chaos that is erupted in the streets of New York and heads towards his father's apartment. As you said, there was no orderly in that orderly leaving. Back to California, and Steve's getting ready to leave for the El Toro military base, since he's a Marine pilot, apparently, and his holiday leave has just been cancelled because of, well, aliens.
Can we just stop for a moment and make note of the fact of how beautiful he looks in his uniform?
He's very well pressed, it has to be said.
Yes, appreciate the Will Smithness.
I think at that point was probably the point where, for me, he suddenly wasn't the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air anymore. This was a very different look to what we'd known him as, either as the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Him in this very smart military uniform, he suddenly looked like a young adult. You know, he actually looked like a responsible young man instead of a crazy teenager.
With baggy shorts and fluorescent clothing.
His girlfriend, Jasmine, Vivica A. Fox, again, I know the name, but I can't think from where, isn't pleased that he's heading into danger as opposed to moving away from it, so they argue. But, well, obviously they make up before he heads out.
And it's his job. He doesn't, he wants to do it.
He does. Steve tells Jasmine to get some stuff together and join him at the base. She seems pretty relieved by the idea of being with him in a safe place, but also because it's a step along their relationship path, with Steve introducing Jasmine to his unit. Because, for some reason, he seems to be slightly ashamed of her. We don't know why at this point.
That didn't come across, to be fair, but then...
No. David arrives at his father's house, much to his father's surprise, and he seems to want to go on a road trip. The President is on the phone with the First Lady again. He's pretty eager to have her home, as she's in California, but she's not leaving just yet. She says she'll get out as soon as the interviews are done, and then she will head to Nellis Air Force Base. Julius and David are on the road trying to get to Washington, but traffic is heavy, and Julius is not the fastest driver in the world, much to David's frustration.
So I was like, we already know there's a 6-hour countdown, and he's trying to get to Washington to tell the president about this, like, within those 6 hours. I hopped onto Google Maps to see how long it takes to get from New York City to Washington, D.C.
As did I.
In normal traffic conditions, it's about 4 hours. And this is certainly not normal traffic conditions.
And Julius is not the fastest driver in the world either, as we've established.
So I'm a bit disbelieving of the time frame for this particular journey in these circumstances.
It seems like they maybe want us to suspend our disbelief about that just a smidge.
I was fine with suspending my disbelief about all the aliens and anything sciencey like that. But when it came to driving from New York to Washington, I was like, no, you're not selling me here. No.
And it's a drive that I suspect a lot of people, sort of do on, at least on the semi-regular, because they're two major cities in America that aren't that far from each other, so.
Yeah.
And I appreciate David's pain, because I have been in the car with my father, and he's now getting to the point where he also drives far too slowly. And it is very frustrating.
Especially when you're on a countdown before
especially when the world's about to end.
The world.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a bit of a stressful time to be in a
Of all the times to hurry up a bit, I think that's one of them.
Yep.
Yeah, I think just put your foot down a little bit. Just accelerate. It's okay.
Back in California, and Russell Case's kids are watching the TV news, which features a story about their father being arrested that afternoon.
Aww.
Which must be nice to see. He was arrested for using his crop duster to drop flyers warning about the aliens. I guess the combination of the aliens' arrival and their dad getting arrested is just that little bit too much for the young Cases, so the kids decide to pack up the RV and leave.
Now, did he already have the flyers? Or did he go out during this and get a load of flyers printed?
It's a very good question. I do not know.
I think he probably already had the flyers, that he's tried giving these out previously. And now he's just gone, right, I'm going to take my entire stocks of these flyers. Goodness knows where he's keeping them, because that trailer is not particularly large. And dump them out my plane. Like, I really do feel for this
together
guy.
in Word and then taking it to, like, sort of the local Staples or whatever to get copies made.
Yeah, exactly.
In this very short.
I mean, we might be slightly overanalyzing
They've all
this.
legged it
It's like,
because of the aliens
should I be using this font or should I be using a different font? What's some 1996 clip art I can drop into this flyer super, super quickly that kind of looked like an alien?
Do you want this colour or black and white? Colour will make it stand out a bit more.
Well, here's some clip art of an alien, but unfortunately it looks really friendly, and that's not exactly what I wanted. You know what? It's just going to have to do.
So yes, they get in their RV and leave, but their dad shows up just as they're driving out and joins them. So if they're trying to get rid of their deadbeat dad, they did a bad job there.
They love him. It's just that they're a bit at their end of their tether with him. Bless him.
Steve arrives at El Toro, where he finds everyone crowded around a TV watching the news, including his buddy, Jimmy, played by Harry Connick Jr. That's one thing about this film as well. I know it's 1996, but all the TVs look tiny and really, really old. Steve and Jimmy walk to their lockers, where Steve receives some further bad news. A letter from NASA rejecting him from the space shuttle program.
No.
Boo hiss!
Steve wants to go into space. Again, something for later, one feels.
He'll never get there. That guy is
He'll never get into
going
space.
to space. We know that
No.
because of this rejection letter. Absolutely
on.
not happening ever.
No chance of space for this boy.
As he chats with Jimmy by the locker, Steve drops an engagement ring. Jimmy picks it up, holding the ring up to Steve from the ground and accidentally mimicking a proposal, which is mildly amusing.
So until this point, I assumed that he was married to her already. So
I thought it was really sweet, though, that it was a dolphin ring, and Will was like, she likes dolphins.
yeah.
And I thought that was just really sweet.
Yeah,
that
he's not just
taken
gone
the
out
time
and
to-
gone, right, here's
Yeah.
a generic whatever ring. He's gone, what will she love?
He's put serious thought into this. It's really
Yeah.
sweet.
However, Jimmy takes this opportunity to remind Steve of the downsides to his career of marrying an exotic dancer, which seems to be what Jasmine does for a living.
She's
Yeah,
an
because,
exotic
oh my
dancer,
god, she has a
sure.
job, and... oh.
Yeah. Again, this might be the 90s coming through with that.
Yes.
Even to me, that felt a bit like, what?
Yes.
Why is that a
Judgmental
problem?
much?
Yeah, seriously.
We switch to Jasmine's strip club where it's pretty empty and the only customers there are watching the news rather than the show. Fair enough.
Because, of course, the very moment that we learn that she's a stripper, we have to cut to her stripping.
Or just dancing, to be honest.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
no
that's
stripping
true.
happening.
She wasn't really, was she?
Jasmine goes backstage and tries to convince her colleague Tiffany not to go out and join the party of alien lovers who are sort of on top of... It looks like to be on top of the big bank tower in downtown LA. And no one's quite ever sort of works out how they would get up
Yeah,
there.
how did they get up there?
Presumably they know the security guard or something.
But it is just, it's a helicopter landing pad. You go down and then go into the building. So yeah, it makes no sense.
Well, if there's a helicopter landing pad, then there's obviously stairs.
Yeah, but you have to go through the building and it's a bank building. I'm not sure it's that easy to get in.
Yeah, they'll know the security guard. Hand wave, it's fine.
So she tries to convince Tiffany not to go and the Tiffany agrees that not to, but we don't
we
strictly
don't believe her.
David and his dad finally arrive at the White House,
Hey.
where he gets in touch with Connie. to
Somehow
make sure.
within the 6 hours. What? No.
So he contacts Connie and to make sure that they can get in. Although she's pretty annoyed, and there's definitely some tension between her and David. I can't think why. No. Outside, a helicopter equipped with visual communication apparatus takes off. Now, this is the welcome wagon.
I have a fun fact about the welcome wagon.
Do go on.
For anyone out there interested, it was a Sikorsky S-64 Sky Crane. And it had an array of flashing lights on it. And Dean Devlin says in the DVD commentary to this film that when they first test flew this, then they got over 150 calls to the Orange County police saying that they've spotted a UFO.
Oh,
I'm not surprised, but yes.
I love that.
that is great.
So as the helicopter's taken off outside, David and his dad enter the Oval Office, and they discuss the last time David and the president met. Apparently it didn't go well. Ended in a fist fight because David thought that the not yet president and Connie were having an affair, which is odd because he obviously seems very devoted to his wife and small child. So,
Well, I think if it got to the point of fist fight, that I think that David wasn't thinking particularly clearly in that moment. So, yeah.
no, true. It does seem a little bit out of character for him. The president leaves his meeting where he is watching the welcome wagon's progress to join David, Julius and Connie in the Oval Office. The president is perhaps understandably not happy to see David. However, he lets David explain why the satellites have been disrupted and to explain that the aliens are actually using the US's satellites against them to communicate. And that actually seems like a minor sort of fudge, but we'll come back later.
They had like a nod towards science in order to do this. We had a nice drawing of a basic diagram so as to sell us on the science.
Yeah, and it's explaining to a combat pilot what line of sight meant seemed a little bit kind of...
He wasn't really explaining to a combat pilot, though, was he? He was explaining to the millions of audience members in cinemas around the world.
She's
This
right.
is true.
Breaking the fourth wall.
Meanwhile, the welcome wagon is approaching the ship and starting to flash its lights. Convinced of the threat that David has told him about, the president runs into the Oval Office and orders an immediate evacuation of the cities and a return of the welcome wagon. However, as he does that, the alien ship starts to open up and fires on the helicopter.
Kaboom!
Rude.
That goes
And this is
badly.
with 27 minutes left on the clock. So, 5.5 hours after David's going, it's 6 hours then, and we're at this point.
You can tell that because every time David opens up his slightly, well, I say aged MacBook, but it would be modern at the time.
Yes, it's
there's
a stylish contemporary MacBook.
Big old countdown going down to 0.
I appreciated that. I don't need a realistic, operating system or anything at that point. I just want to see the countdown.
President leaves the White House with David, Connie, Julius, and the rest of the crew. We're in California, and the First Lady's finally on the move, but Jasmine is stuck in a throng of traffic caused by the fleeing masses. Jasmine's friend Tiffany joins the rooftop alien party, despite promising that she wouldn't. So we know what's going to happen there, then.
Oh, Tiffany.
We do jump around again here a bit as all the other characters are trying to evacuate from the various locations. Thanks to Dave, we know the clock is ticking down and close to running out.
9 minutes on the clock when the White House evacuates.
Finally, the spaceship over the cities opens. Some people watch, others flee, as the area underneath the ships is bathed in a bluey-green light. The president and his posse board Air Force One.
His entourage. That's a much better word.
The president and his entourage board Air Force One. As they taxi to take off, the timer on David's laptop counts down to 0.
Because he immediately, as he gets on the plane, scrabbles to open his laptop to see the counter.
Dun, dun, dun.
So that we can see the counter.
Yep.
Yeah.
The music cue changes, and around the world, the ships fire on the cities below them.
No!
David's colleague Marty, who is stuck in traffic, seems to get caught in a wave of fire sweeping along the streets of New York.
And we start
Another
seeing
one
the
to the
shots
body
that
count.
we've all seen in all the trailers in the run-up to the movie's release.
Air Force One is barely able to get off the ground in time, but they somehow manage to outrun a wall of fire.
I have a couple of facts about this whole, all
Yes,
the
go on.
bits blowing up everywhere, because obviously we see lots of things being blown up now, but that's the main focus of all the trailers that we've had. So the White House that they exploded was built at 1/12 scale just to be blown up.
Mm-hmm.
Daisy, are
Yes?
you telling me that they didn't blow up the real White House
No,
for this movie?
They didn't blow up the real White House, and they didn't really need the 1/12 beautiful scale model of the White House for anything else. Although the point at which Julius and David pull up the car in front, they did use it for that shot, I think, just to get a little bit more money's worth out of this incredible miniature that they've built just to blow it up. They had 9 cameras film the explosion at various speeds, and then one of them was 12 times faster than normal, and then they played back at normal speeds so that they made the explosion seem larger and slower on film. Genius.
The old Thunderbirds trick.
The film itself holds the record for the most miniature model work to appear in one film.
Wow.
And because we've made such advances in our CGI stuff since, then people believe this film will always hold that record, because why would you put that much money into the model building when you can just CGI it?
Challenge accepted. I don't have a screenplay, I don't have a budget, I don't have a studio, I don't have actors, but I'm gonna do it. Just watch me.
The model shop supervisor, Michael Joyce, estimated that more miniatures were used for this film than in any other 2 films combined.
Wow.
So a lot of miniature work, slow-mo recording of explosions to make them look bigger.
Yep.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Stuck in traffic as the explosions start, Jasmine realises she and her son have to run on foot. She makes it to a safe place, and their dog joins them just as the fireball passes through the tunnel.
But doesn't go through the doorway.
This actually really annoys me, and it's always annoyed me, because she kicks the door inwards, which means the door opens in towards the room, and yet somehow when the big fireball comes through, it doesn't go in as well.
Yeah.
It's a safe place in that's what they call them when there are accidents and things in the tunnels, and they
so you
are
don't get
vaguely
squashed.
fireproof. But I don't think it would stand that sort of temperature.
Yeah,
or...
what they had here was a decision between actual logic, close the door, and that's how she's going to stay safe, versus seeing the fire rolling past through the doorway, dramatic film effect. So to me, what's actually happened is she slammed the door closed, and that fire is rolling past, but it's on the other side of the door, and we're just seeing like a retelling of it with the door open so that we can see that dramatic effect.
That's a little bit reachy. But I will just say I would have been so mad if anything bad had happened to the doggo. Mm-hmm. More so than any of the people who died in the course of this storyline. If anything had happened to a dog, I would have been so mad.
It's July the 3rd now, and several cities are in ruin. Things are pretty eerie and quiet around New York City, where the Statue of Liberty is on her side, because, once again,
she's taking a nap.
You can't show big cities without showing all their landmarks.
Well, otherwise, how do you know what city you're in, sweetie? I mean, you do if you've been to any cities, but there are a lot of people who really haven't.
Leaping over to the West Coast, the Russell family is now on the road again, but they stop because one of their kids, Troy, is sick. Which, I never really worked out why that bit was in there. Back on Air Force One, and the president is feeling guilty for not evacuating the city sooner. Then a military officer comes in and announces that the First Lady's helicopter never made it to Nellis Air Force Base.
Oh,
no. Jasmine and Dylan, and I assume the dog, are coming out of the hiding to survey the rubble.
So I never got what her name was until, towards the end. So throughout all of my notes here, Jasmine is referred to by me as Stripper Mom. But I'd like to revise my notes and actually call her Badass Stripper Mom, because she is amazing, and to me, she's the best part of this whole movie. And here is really that moment where she went sideways where everyone else was running it directly in the path of the fire is like her first moment sensible. Of badassery. And it just continues from that point on. Straight away now, she's like, okay, all this devastation, I'm going to hotwire a truck. No problem. Got my kid, got my dog, I'm going to do this. She's just awesome, and I love her.
Yeah.
Stripper Mom, badass stripper mom.
Didn't she just find that, we haven't got to the truck but didn't she just find the keys to the truck underneath the,
it was in the,
inside the
sun
visor
shield
thing.
visor thing, yeah.
Well,
that's mostly where people leave them in America, apparently. Because
apparently in films,
every single movie and TV show, we need the keys. Let's try putting the sun visor down and
why would anyone in this...
I've never noticed that before. Is that a thing?
It is in American movies.
Wow, and the keys always fall out.
Wow, that's so
Why
stupid.
would any trucker in the midst of all this chaos go, right, I will turn my engine off, take the keys out and put them in my sun visor for safekeeping until I'm back later?
Suspension of disbelief.
Yeah. Meanwhile, at El Toro base, Steve and the other fighter pilots are getting briefed and getting ready to take to the air. In Air Force One, the president and the advisors are discussing the damage and the upcoming attack on the ship. Skipping back over to Jimmy and Steve, they're in their planes approaching one of the vast visitor spaceships. They lock and load for an attack.
They want to whoop E.T.'s ass, to quote them.
Wow.
They fire, but the missiles can't penetrate the ship's shields.
They've got shields. There's some kind of force field.
A swarm of little alien ships comes out to battle the fighter pilots. The alien fighters also have shields, making the fairly one-sided fight. The aliens wipe out a lot of the pilots, including Steve's friend Jimmy.
Oh no.
Oh, Harry Connick Jr., we knew you so little.
Yeah, I really didn't care about this character dying. And although Steve cares in that moment, he never seems affected at all for the rest of the movie. So it's not like this was a long impact thing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like there's so much going on that characters don't really have time to dwell on the fact that someone has died.
So it felt a bit odd to have this, because I didn't care as an audience member, and our main character to care only very briefly did. So
I think it's one of those emotional beats that just it doesn't really quite work, because you want to establish some kind of emotional thing, and it.
Whether it's just a case of we are supposed to feel something for this character because we know who he is because
I
he's
think you're probably
someone
right there,
famous elsewhere.
Which is why I felt nothing, because even now I've heard his name, but I don't really know who he is.
The aliens then go on to attack El Toro while one alien craft chases Steve. Steve manages to escape unharmed while causing the alien craft to crash with a stupid stunt of letting go of... Was it he basically ejected his parachute, which they used to slow down, and it covered the screen of the alien spaceship. As if this spaceship is relying entirely on visual sight to fly. It's just... Ugh. Anyway, so he crashes, the alien spaceship crashes. He gets out, ejects safely, and parachutes to the ground, where he heads over to the crashed spaceship and then punches the alien visitor in the head, knocking it out.
Because he has no sense of self-preservation.
But also, we get told later on that these are sort of like biomechanical suits that are there to protect them, and they're kind of like armour.
Yes.
But he still manages to knock it out with one punch.
And somehow the spaceship opens up for him when he approaches it as well. Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We see some tentacles as well, because, tentacles.
Jasmine, Dylan and their dog are still wandering the rubble when Jasmine finds a working truck to drive. This is the thing where she sort of hotwires it and gets the keys and drives around.
Wait. Can I just interject? The dog's name is Boomer.
We're back with Russell Case and his family. Troy is still sick, and I say I've no idea why this is a thing. It doesn't seem to add anything to the plot. It doesn't seem to go anywhere. It just seems to be this kid gets travel sick.
Yeah.
It's like,
A reason for them to have stopped at the side of the road at the point at which they did.
yeah, I think of. Miguel tells his dad that there's a rumour that there's a spaceship on the way, although how that rumour gets spread, no one's really explaining. However, Troy's not the only one feeling sick, because we're back on Air Force One, and David is now very airsick.
Oh no.
Julius talks to Connie about her relationship with David and where it all went wrong. Because if you want anybody talking to your ex-wife about how things went wrong, it's your father, obviously.
And this is absolutely the right time to be talking about that as well. You know, there are no more pressing things to discuss.
Oh yeah, no, it absolutely takes precedence over anything else. You know, priorities.
Yeah.
Is, you know, the divorce that has already happened.
Meanwhile, the president discussing his options with the team. They learn that NORAD is gone, along with the vice president and joint chiefs. Secretary of State Nimziki wants to launch nuclear weapons at the spaceship. However, David overhears this and is furious, but he's a big environmentalist apparently, and nukes really aren't his thing.
But he's not an advisor to the president, and he has no place in government at all, so his views are entirely irrelevant.
Indeed, so Nimziki starts yelling at David to get out, and then Julius gets mad. Starts ranting about how the government has known about aliens since Area 51.
To which people chuckle and then actually no.
Roll their eyes. President assures Julius there's no such thing as Area 51, but Nimziki corrects him and says that that's not entirely accurate.
Oh my god,
About
this
that.
burp.
And everybody stares at him in like a, what? Back in LA, and Jasmine is driving around rescuing people and loading them onto the back of her
She's
truck.
got loads of them in there. She has been going around and just saving people because she's awesome. She could have just gone, I'm going to make a beeline to my unknown at this point future husband, and I'm just going to not care about anyone else. I'm just going to look after me, my son, and my dog. But no, she's going, I will find anyone who's alive along the way and rescue them and take them to safety because she's awesome.
She's awesome.
All the damn medals. Seriously. She's...
Yep, including along the way she finds the First Lady who's been badly injured in a helicopter crash.
Yes. She doesn't even let on to the First Lady that she knows who the First Lady is. She's just like, yeah, get in. You're one of my rescued people now.
Another one to the pile. I mean, the truck. Steve is dragging his captured alien through the desert, wrapped in his parachute.
I have a fun fact about this scene.
Do go on.
Go on.
So this was filmed on the Salt Flats near the Great Salt Lake in Utah. And the point at which the quite memorable line where he yells, "What the hell is that smell?" That was not a scripted line. That was actually Will Smith complaining about the smell. The Great Salt Lake is home to tiny crustaceans called brine shrimp, and when they die, the bodies sink to the bottom of the lake, which is quite shallow, and they decompose there. When the wind kicks up, the bottom mud is disturbed, and the smell of millions of decaying brine shrimp is quite strong and very unpleasant, and nobody told Will Smith about this.
Yeah, nobody wants to be downwind of that lake.
So yeah,
That's
he's
brilliant.
dragging this, whatever it is, the poor actor is dragging, and there's this horrific smell. So he just ad-libs that line because seriously, what is that smell?
Aww.
So yes, despite the smell, Steve is dragging his captured alien through the desert when he sees a herd of RVs driving towards him. The Case family is one of them, and he stops to pick up Steve. Steve wants to go to a nearby base he saw from the air, although Case doesn't see it on any map, but Steve is certain it's there.
I have a fun fact about this. The fun fact is that it wasn't on any maps for until 2013. I want to say 2013. Because I was listening to a conspiracy theory podcast about Area 51, and there are various things, obviously, about the aliens, which is why what gets in this movie. But it was actually not allowed to be on any maps, and not allowed to be any aerial photographs. And then there's all kinds of things that the president signs every year to keep things under wrap. And it was only until a bunch of memos were declassified that anyone even knew officially about Area 51.
Yeah, I mean, it was known about for a long while.
But there were, until the memos were declassified, the ones from the 60s, then, it was never officially acknowledged. And I think, in fact, in 2016, President Obama was the first president to actually officially mention Area 51.
Fair enough.
So that's why it's not on the map in 1996.
Air Force One arrives at Area 51. Obviously, it's on their maps. Where the president and the others,
it's a government facility.
Yeah, where the president and the others get a tour. He meets Dr. Oken.
Brett Spiner!
I forgot he was in this.
Me too. And then I was like,
oh my god, it's Data. What?
Yep. So he meets he meets Dr. Oken, head research scientist at Area 51. Dr. Oken takes the president to see a spaceship they captured from aliens some time ago. Then he takes the president to see an actual alien body they have stored, although this one is dead.
But everything on the spaceship has been not much use to them since the 60s. And then when the aliens arrived, everything turned on. And they've been having a right old time playing with everything. And I think that's great.
Oh, yeah.
They were super
just
excited.
Totally disassociated from the real world where people were actually dying and
So for the aliens themselves, the production designer Patrick Totopoulos, I'm not very good at names, presented Emmerich with 2 concepts for the aliens, but Emmerich liked both of the designs, so they used both. One of them for the aliens, and then the other concept for the external biomechanical suits that they were wearing. So that's why we have this kind of biomechanical suit, and then the alien thing, because he really liked both concepts so much.
The president asked David to work with Area 51 scientists and share his expertise and knowledge with them, and what he has discovered about their communications so far.
About the signal, and the dude's like, what signal?
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a signal.
The RVs are arriving at the secret base. The gate guards are initially reluctant to let Steve in, but when he shows the guard the unconscious alien, they do let him in.
They ask for his clearance. He brings out the alien and says, "This is my clearance."
Yeah, that was epic.
Yeah.
I love that.
And then again, the gate guard was someone I recognised from... It's from Stargate, but I think it was actually from the TV series, not the actual film, so...
Well, I just like the fact that the president's wife is President Rosalind from Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, yes, of course she is, yes.
Mrs. Also President.
Is.
Yay!
Yep. Dr. Oken rushes to meet them, eager to see the unconscious but alive alien. Steve makes his way inside the base and meets with the president, who has been discussing the bleak prospects facing the Earth.
I have a fun fact for here. In this briefing room, then you can see there's like a big screen behind them at one point, and you can see like a night vision panning shots of the Area 51 base. Those are actual shots of actual Area 51 taken by a conspiracy theorist from Freedom Ridge. So, because they didn't have any photos of the place, so they got this is actual footage of Area 51. So the Freedom Ridge you can't get to anymore. The US government commandeered it in the late 90s after this film.
Yeah, they bought up all the land so that people couldn't do tours and stuff.
But I love that is actually Area 51 they've got on the base screen behind them.
That's amazing.
So Steve speaks to the president and then learns from General Gray that El Toro has been destroyed, which, as far as he knows, means that Jasmine is also dead, because that's where she should have been. But she's not, because we then see Jasmine arriving with the others at El Toro base, which she finds absolutely destroyed. Like Steve, she assumes that means the worst about his fate, because she doesn't know he's still alive either.
Oh, they arrive at the base. That's why he knows where to go.
Yeah, because they were heading... That's where she was heading to meet up with him, so that's where she went to. And then obviously found out that it was destroyed, so she was like, oh, he must be dead then. But no.
Yeah, no, I was commenting to Daisy when later on, and I was like, how does he know where to go? And
I just assumed they'd moved on from the base, that they'd just been travelling around from that point, trying to find somewhere else that they could go for help.
No, I think they went to the base and just called it a night there.
Yeah, we were imagining, what's his name, Steve, just like flying around and getting out of the helicopter and yelling, Jasmine! And then just being
until he got it right.
Back in the helicopter again, off he goes again.
But if she was at the base, then of course that would be the first place that he would look, and that makes more sense now. So thank you.
Sitting in the rubble of the airbase, Jasmine and the First Lady have a heart-to-heart where she admits that she knows who the First Lady is, but she voted for the other guy. Fair enough.
Oh, but then we have to have the obligatory, well, what do you do? I'm a dancer. Ballet?
What kind of dancer?
No, exotic,
an exotic
because
dancer.
that's
Oh.
really important to know right now.
Yeah. And then the First Lady kind of seems like she feels a little bit uncomfortable about this, but then she's like, oh, I'll be open-minded. And it's like, yes, you should be.
Back at Area 51, and Dr. Oaken and the other scientists are operating on the unconscious but alive alien.
Idiots.
Trying to get his biomechanical suit off.
Idiots.
It works, but as we said, there's a major downside. The alien inside is awake and attacks.
Idiots.
Apparently knocking out the scientists with a high-pitched sonic, possibly psionic weapon. Outside the operating room, the President and the others look on. Dr. Oaken comes flying against the window, and it's clear the alien has him around his neck and is speaking through him.
Tentacles and everything.
Tentacles.
Smashing.
How on earth did that alien fit inside that bodysuit?
With alien
Was it like
magic.
a Slovene thing with like the decompression unit?
They're really
Well,
good
no,
at
he's still in the
turning
bodysuit at that point. Yeah, I think the alien itself is only about 2 foot tall and is like tiny. So.
Yeah, but no. The bodysuit wasn't. It wasn't. The alien expanded.
No, I think the bodysuit flips open, sort of hinged at the back. So it's obvious that the alien has him around the neck and is speaking through him. Dr. Oaken / the alien demands to be released. The President then asks if they can have peace between them, but the alien / Oaken says no.
No peace.
No peace.
Because their Morse code message says die.
What do you want us to do then? He asks the alien.
And the alien says he wants them to die.
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 Suddenly
You just keep saying the word die, and it's a beautiful moment.
Suddenly, the alien again starts emitting its high-pitched sonic weapon, attacking the President. Major Mitchell, played by a very young-looking Adam Baldwin,
He's so small.
draws his pistol and shoots the alien dead.
Yeah, I think it must be psionic because the President said I could feel him inside my head.
Yeah, however, the psychic / psionic link formed between the alien and the President worked both ways. And conveniently, the President now sees what the alien's plan
And
is.
he says, let's nuke the bastards.
Yep. They're like locusts, moving from planet to planet, gobbling up natural resources. Which is the case, and that is just their natural way of doing things. Then does that make them the bad guys?
Yes, because they're destroying, they're genociding whole planets.
But that's just what they do. That's the same as locusts, isn't it?
Locusts are bad.
It's kind of the same as us with this planet.
Yeah.
Are we the
So
bad
yes, the
guys?
President knows the plan and he says he wants to nuke them. Meanwhile, Steve decides to borrow a helicopter from the base and heads to El Toro.
Yes, borrow.
Borrow a helicopter from a very large sergeant who...
And David and Connie have a tiff as well.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what off, but I've got that before he steals the helicopter.
I think they're having a tiff because he wants to. The president wants to nuke things, and he's not particularly into nuking things.
And so of course
he's an
have a go at the
environmentalist.
ex-wife. That makes sense.
In the command center, the president and his team are monitoring preparations for the nuclear attack against the spaceship that's hovering over Houston. Because if you're going to destroy any city, then why not Houston?
They say in which city, and then he's told it's Houston, and it's kind of a moment of yeah.
Apologies to anybody who lives in Houston that might be listening to this. I've never been to Houston. It might be beautiful, but yeah, it does seem to be a case of it's Houston, whatever.
Yeah, all right. Oh, it's like, oh no, which city? It's Houston. Oh, okay then. You know, I don't know anything about Houston, but they seem to be like, oh, okay, about this.
I feel like it's probably quite sprawly, but it looks pretty from these pictures.
They deploy the nuclear missile, but even though it hits, the spaceship remains unscathed.
They all celebrated.
After this dramatic pause and the smoke, and not even waiting for the smoke to clear, it was premature celebration.
Typical men.
Yeah.
Yes.
They call back the other planes heading to the other cities with nukes because they know it's not going to make any difference. Back in California and El Toro base, and the First Lady isn't doing well at all. Suddenly, overhead, Jasmine sees a bright searchlight. Is it the aliens? No, it's just a helicopter. It's Steve! They're rescued.
Jasmine! He yells as he gets out
You've never had a friend like me. The President takes his daughter, a very young Mae Whitman, to visit the First Lady, who is now at the base getting care. Doctor tells the President that the First Lady's internal bleeding is too severe for her to recover. No. He tries to put a brave face on it for his wife, but she knows she's dying.
She doesn't know. He tells her that she's going to be fine.
And she knows that he's lying.
How?
He calls her a liar. She knows him.
He never tells her that she's dying. She's going along not knowing that she's dying.
No, he tells her that she's going to be fine. She knows that he's lying, and she knows that she's dying.
I don't think she does.
I get the...
It's ambiguous, and he's hiding it from her, and he doesn't have that right.
Exactly.
He eventually exits the room and confirms to his daughter that Mummy is sleeping, in other words.
So he lies to his daughter as well.
Yeah.
But then she is quite young, and I think that's... I don't know. Daybreak! It's finally the 4th of July! Dun, 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 dun. David is having trouble coping with everything that's going on, and is dipping deeply into a bottle of rum he is holding. His father gives him a bit of a pep talk. When Julius tells David to get off the floor before he catches a cold, David seems to get an idea, and after some further research and testing, he rallies all the scientists and assembled forces together. Because it's one of those where someone just says something and then it's brainwave time. Which always used to annoy me about House as well. They'd always be completely and utterly stumped, and then someone makes an innocuous comment, and suddenly light bulb
flash. It's a common
He
trope.
shows them how he can give the alien ship a computer virus and disable their shields. And this is never particularly clear in the film, but what my understanding of it is they've jumped onto Earth's network to coordinate their attack. And so David then uses that connection to plant a virus in their systems, because it was never particularly clear how he was getting into the alien systems. But I always assumed it was because they had jumped onto their network, so they were just sort of returning the connection.
Was it not just the system just for that ship that he was doing?
Yeah, because they have to go all the way into the mothership, spoilers for the big plan, to plant the virus for the whole thing. I think he was just doing it locally.
Yeah, I think he was
it might be.
plugged in a wired connection basically to the alien ship, which
could be.
The staff there will have established how to plug into the wired system in all the time they've had it since the 60s.
Yeah, maybe I was just reading too much into it. Who knows? They get the virus to the mothership. He suggests flying up in the alien ship they have at Area 51. Steve volunteers to fly the alien ship because he's seen one flying, and that pretty much makes him about as qualified as anybody else around
And
here.
because he wants to be an astronaut.
It's his only chance of getting to space.
Yeah.
We know this. He's not saying that.
The Secretary of Defense is skeptical, but the President is finally fed up with his crap, and so flies him on the spot.
Which is awesome.
Yay.
It was
It's
like, you
about
lied
time.
to me. You should have told me.
Possibly
Yeah.
not the best time to not have a Secretary of Defense, but you know. Better
No, he
no,
wasn't doing much to help.
better no one
He
in the
takes
job
over.
than a bad person in the job.
Well, they've already lost all of the sort of chiefs of staff and everything, so there's not exactly a chain of command structure at the minute
Yeah.
anyway. So around the world, various countries receive word via Morse code of the Americans' plans, including the really frustrating thing of the British standing there going, "Well, it's about bloody time."
Oh my god.
Despite it's like everybody's completely incompetent apart from the Americans.
Yeah, this was
Everyone
ridiculous.
around the world was just waiting for the Americans to get on with it and have a plan that they could tell
Including
everyone
all the
else.
Russians and...
Yeah, and of course all the English soldiers sound like they came out of Eton, and that's
Yeah.
just totally unrealistic.
And they have the scene where you've got the Israeli and the sort of Palestinian sort of soldiers sort of facing each other down, and sort of, they're going to have to work together.
The film was actually banned in Israel because of that moment. They couldn't
Wow.
show
No,
the two working together. It's not allowed in Israel.
Jeez.
Yeah.
It's a shame, but then that's politics and religion
Yeah.
for you. So, unfortunately, the US is having trouble finding enough pilots to participate in the counteroffensive.
Because most of them blew up.
Everyone's
Yep,
dead.
the authorities
I mean,
start
really.
rounding up people in Area 51 base who have any kind of flight experience.
Oh,
And that's
wait,
how
we know
drunken-
somebody.
If only
Yeah,
we'd
how
been
the
following the
drunkard
antics
Russell
of one
Case.
particular character who's had nothing to do with the plot for the entire film.
Yep, Russell Case ends up volunteering despite his questionable behaviour
And he's
previously.
still drunk right now.
Yeah.
And drinking
Yeah.
whilst in the briefing.
Steve and Jasmine are getting dressed up for something. It seems they're finally getting married.
Yay!
Connie and David serve as witnesses, and Connie notices that David still wears his wedding ring.
Oh, that's weird. That is a bit weird.
Yeah.
Some things they're difficult to get off though, unless you know.
And
you know,
then,
lots
then
of
they're
grease
holding
and-
hands.
President heads out to the base as the pilots are preparing for the attack. He gives probably the most famous speech of the
With
movie.
a swelling orchestra score
Yes.
and much cheer.
I think some people really hate the speech and some people really love it, and I don't know. It's
it was a bit
very
cheesy.
It's
very
fine.
cheesy, but it's fine. It does what it does, doesn't it?
It's no Pacific Rim Idris Elba, but you know what is.
Yeah, well.
He then gets suited up to join the other pilots since, as we may have mentioned previously, he was a pilot before a president and he wants to get play too.
See, now this really annoys me.
Go on.
So there's already been like a massive breakdown of like everything in the country, and having the president safe and intact is very important right now. And B, he's been told his wife is dying, so his young child is about to be left without one parent, and he's going to go off and risk his life as well.
I assumed the wife was dead.
Yes, at this point, the wife is already dead.
Oh, I thought she was still dying. Well, either way, he's
way,
about to go and, you know, potentially he's putting himself at a great risk to potentially leave his child orphanless and his country presidentless, just because he wants to go and be a brave fighter pilot.
I think it's more of he doesn't want to ask them to risk their lives if he wasn't willing to do it.
It's incredibly irresponsible from every possible aspect for him to do that. And it annoys me.
You tell him.
Can't argue with that, but then equally, it's Independence Day by Emmerich and Devlin, so...
Yeah. I'm just saying, that character's decision really annoys me.
Inside the base, Steve and David say goodbye to their families and friends, prepare to leave. Everybody gets in his or her plane, ship, including Case. His kids are clearly proud of him, because they stand there looking vaguely proud. After a slight false start, Steve and David take off and enter space.
I liked the realism of
You
that
missed the best
start.
bloody line! It's like, oops. What do you mean, oops? Let's try this again. Without the oops.
Yeah.
It's my favourite line!
As to say, false start. They do take off and enter space, heading towards the mothership. Finally, Steve becomes an astronaut and achieves his dream.
Yay!
They lose piloting control pretty quickly afterwards as they enter the mothership's environment.
Oops.
David was expecting this, or I don't know how he could possibly know this would happen.
Assume the worst.
It's always a little alarming to Steve, who points out the problem of how do they fly away if they have no controls? But yes, no, there's quite a good sort of, although it's very brief, they don't really have a lot of screen time together. There's quite a lot of chemistry between Jeff
They're
and
great.
Will Smith.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jeff Goldblum has chemistry with everybody.
He just exudes this very special, sensual
Charisma.
magnetism.
The Goldblum and Smith scenes and the Goldblum and Judd Hirsch scenes, apparently most of their dialogue was just improv.
Can believe that.
Well done.
Connie waits in the control room below, worrying about everybody's safety as it looks like alien ships are heading directly towards Area 51. They head outside and gather the civilian RV camp.
Only because she goes, because the army dude goes, oh, well, everyone's safe. She's like, well, what about the people outside? And they're like, oh, I forgot there were actually other people in the world.
Yeah, no, it's very much, it's Connie that seems to be driving this bit there.
Well, yeah, because she's awesome.
They head outside to the gathered civilian RV camp and start to move everybody inside of the base for safety. Back in space, Steve and David are entering the mothership. Once docked, David closes the window shields, hiding their presence, and starts to upload the virus.
As the ship is going into the mothership, and you can just see all of these aliens all around, and they're kind of sinking down in their seats. And it's
like,
just like, oh,
I've got a solution.
Oh, this is gonna all go very wrong right now. Oh.
So yes, they hide their presence and start uploading the virus into the ship's systems. Back on Earth, thinking the shields are now disabled, the pilots in the fighter craft start firing on the spaceship, but no, nothing happens. It still gets hit by the shield, or stopped by the shield.
And then they're told not to fire anymore, but there's a defiant pilot who decides to send another one.
The president says he's going to try one more shot. So he fires a missile and wait for it, and wait for it, and wait for it. And it hits! Hurrah!
The virus has worked, and they were all... Somehow they managed to correctly tell exactly how long it would take them to get onto the mothership and deploy the virus.
At this point, the alien fighters once again swarm out into battle. However, at this point, the alien fighters no longer have their shields either, so it makes it more of a two-sided battle.
Proper dogfight, then.
David finishes up and says it's time for Steve to get them out of there, but they're stuck.
Oh, no.
Meanwhile, the aliens begin their attack on Area 51, with the fighters managing to ineffectively hit any aircraft sitting on the ground at all. Always annoyed me. Mm-hmm. Lots and lots of explosions.
They're basically stormtroopers.
Yeah.
Not a single aircraft gets blown up in that shot, which I assume is something to do with the fact that they were real aircraft and they couldn't afford to blow them up.
I'm guessing that was probably the case, but it does feel a little bit stormtrooper-ish.
Back up on the mothership, the aliens override the control on Steve and David's craft and open the window blind so they can see who's operating it. Steve and David just hide below the dashboard.
Hide.
So it's like, hide. Meanwhile, the attack against the alien ship near Area 51 continues, but it's not working fast enough, and the ship settles directly over Area 51 and starts opening up in order to fire its primary weapon. Every pilot is out of missiles or has been shot down, with the exception of Case, who is now their only shot of actually taking the ship down. The President and the others realise this, so they provide cover, whilst Case gets into position to fire his missiles directly into the firing chamber underneath the large alien ship.
They clear a path. I like that. They clear a path.
However, Case's missile jams as he tries to fire it. But Case won't be denied payback. After a quick glance at a photo of his kids and a quick request over the radio to tell the kids that he loves them, he's ready for the ultimate sacrifice. Case flies his fighter jet directly up into the firing chamber of the alien ship, and, with an expanding wave of explosions, the alien ship is destroyed and crashes to the ground.
Yay!
And everyone is cheering except for Miguel. He's not. He's like, yeah, that was my dad.
Because, that was my dad. Yeah, he's dead now.
Sad.
Now that they know how to destroy the ships, they spread the word around the world using Morse code.
This really bugs me because it's like, so are they reckoning that none of the other countries anywhere in the world thought, let's put a missile up that huge opening in the bottom? That it took America telling them to do that for them to do it. I reckon everyone else got that message and went, yeah, duh, was that not what you guys were doing?
Seriously.
Back in space, and Steve and David are talking about everything being over. They emerge from their hiding to reveal themselves to the aliens. They then deploy a bomb to fully disable the mothership. The impact of the explosion causes their craft to be jerked free, and they fly out of the mothership and escape.
A nice little tribute to Jurassic Park in that escape as well, as they're leaving the mothership, and Jeff Goldblum in the same cadence as he uses in Jurassic Park says, "Must go faster, must go faster."
Yeah,
I think that was a very nice little tribute to his previous big film success.
Behind them, the mothership explodes, and David and Steve's craft seems to be swept up in the explosion. Around the world, people celebrate as the alien invaders are beaten.
Yay!
President takes a jeep to where Steve and David have crash-landed in a damaged spaceship. Jasmine, Dylan and Connie, also in the jeep, run to meet them, and they hug as 4th of July fireworks lace the sky in the form of the remains of the alien mothership burning up as it falls into the Earth's atmosphere.
Yay!
David, the environmentalist, seems strangely unfussed by the fact that there are now thousands of tons of literally alien material crashing into Earth. The end.
Shall I just pop in the rest of my fun facts here?
Yes!
Go on, yep.
Do you want the body count?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Body count 48. 41 of those were human, 7 of those alien.
Wow.
Yeah. I particularly like this one. They wanted to find some real life inspiration for how a small but elite air force could face off against overwhelming power, like the humans were trying to do with the alien armada here. So they actually contacted the Israeli Air Force to get footage there. And the Israeli Air Force agreed after clearing post-combat videos of any classified materials, and that helped them to script and film that whole finale battle where the shields were down and they were doing proper dogfight things.
Nice.
Yeah,
But the Israelis still banned the film itself.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just, honestly, that is wild.
The US military originally agreed to support the film, allowing them to film at military bases, allowing the actors to consult people who had military roles and things, but they withdrew that support once they learned that the script referenced Area 51.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I remember reading something about that, and I couldn't work out why they'd removed their support of it. But yes, that would make sense.
Because it was classified.
What they expected. Yeah. I mean, it's a movie about an alien invasion, and there's military stuff, and it's set in America. Do you think they're not going to mention Area 51?
But they can't afford to officially endorse it because at that point it was like it doesn't exist. There was no,
It was the world's worst kept
secret.
secret.
It was very much a whole thing.
Yeah, it's one of the world's worst, as you said, one of the world's worst kept secrets, isn't it?
Yeah, but still, they have to try.
That's all.
Any
my
other fun facts there?
Squeezed in
That's
there.
all your fun facts.
Those are good fun facts.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was 1996's Independence Day. Let's get some final thoughts from everybody. Joe?
Still love this movie. I really do. It's very Stargate, it's very Librarians. It's just that sort of like, it could happen, conspiracy theory, aliens. I like that sort of thing. And, it's not too blowy uppy and gratuitous violence. And, the cast are just, they were really well cast and your characters were really well portrayed. I just thought it came together really nicely, and it's a film that I do really enjoy and still really enjoy, despite having watched it twice in the last week.
Fair enough. No, I can't argue with that. Daisy, your final thoughts?
So I love disaster movies. I love the ones that are kind of played straight. You're kind of your 2012 type, trying to show a genuine disaster type ones. I love your super, super cheesy Sharknado, Crocosaurus type ones. This film was one that I felt that they were trying to do straight, but was actually really cheesy, and the balance just wasn't quite right for me. And I don't know why, when I kind of love both ends of the spectrum, something that's kind of walking the line didn't quite fit with me. But the more we've dissected this film, the less enjoyable I found it to be. So a surprise to me to not actually love it on a rewatch like this.
I think that's always a risk with doing something like this podcast, is you actually are watching the film with a very critical eye, which possibly you weren't watching with when you first watched it in 1996 and it was just cheesy.
Or indeed when I watched a Sharknado type movie either.
Yes, I think it's fair to say Sharknado will not be on our list of highest grossing films, so we won't have to watch that.
Oh, I love it. Sharknado 2 is the best of the 5 film franchise. If you're going to watch one Sharknado film, make it Sharknado 2, the second one. That's the subtitle.
Is that like the official subtitle?
That's the official subtitle. Sharknado 2, the second one. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
I shall remember that and then watch none of them.
Yeah, same.
Sammy, final thoughts?
Okay, yes, and I do have them. This movie is cheesy. It is a big wedge of just gloriously runny camembert.
Ew.
But excuse you, it's delicious, thank you. That's my point. It's,
runny cheese.
I just want to spread it on, a nice piece of Scandinavian rye crisp bread and enjoy it with a little dollop of apple chutney on the side. The thing that there are bits where your disbelief is not quite suspended, but I'm willing to forgive it because it doesn't make me angry. I just go, oh my god, am I really supposed to believe that? But I love so many of the people in it that honestly just getting to see them do their thing and be really good at being the characters that they're being makes me happy. Like Will Smith is there being amazing, and Jeff is there being amazing, and Randy, he's just so fun. So, yeah, I enjoyed it for, the people mostly. Data? Did I mention Jeff?
I've got an additional final thought to add to mine, if
Go on.
I can. It's 1996, and it had been actually quite a long time since we'd had a big blockbuster disaster movie. And I love disaster movies, and I don't think we would perhaps have had quite the resurgence of them that we've had since, if it wasn't for Independence Day kind of kicking that resurgence off again, really, which unfortunately means we had Titanic a couple of years later, but so yeah, I think that's probably worth acknowledging and giving a nod to this film for I think that we probably got more disaster movies in the following years because of it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And my final thought is, I enjoyed it. It was very cheesy, and sometimes belief was only just suspended. But it's a fun film. I mean, it's nothing particularly heavy going. It's just entertainment, and as it stands on that, that's absolutely fine. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I would watch it again at some point, probably. Maybe not straight away, but I would definitely watch it again. Yeah, it's good. So yes, that was 1996 is Independence Day. Coming up next, we will have Avatar, another James Cameron, in inverted commas, epic. So that'll be a thing. One of those strange beasts, which is a science fiction action movie that I really did not want to watch. But until then, I would like to thank everybody for listening. I would like to thank my fellow podcasters. Thank you, Joe.
Let's try this again without the oops.
Indeed. Thank you, Daisy.
Thank you.
And thank you, Sammy.
I would like to thank you, sweetheart, for all of the amazing work that you put into this podcast.
Yes,
Nah,
thank
just wing
you,
it.
Dave.
And Joe, who's now taken over some of the editing as well.
Indeed, yes. And Joe's editing skills as well. So thank you all for listening, and we will see you soon. Or we won't see you because we're not watching you. That would be slipping.
You will hear us soon.
Don't
You
tell
will
them
hear
that
from
we're
us
watching
soon.
them. We're not supposed to.
Oh no,
let them know.
Yes, we're supposed to keep that a secret, aren't we? Sorry.
Can you edit that bit out, please? God, don't give away all
So
of them.
thank you all for listening, and we will be back for Avatar. Until then, thank you all very much, and goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Home Movie Club, part of the That Podcast Thing network. Visit us at www.thatpodcastthing.co.uk, where you can find links to all our social media, including Twitter, Facebook, and our new YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe for news of our future episodes coming soon.